Hey guys, let's get started by making the mask. I chose this yarn because it's got different fleshy tones to it, and I'm using Mod Podge to glue it to the paper mask. And you can use any old paintbrush you like to apply it. I'm trimming down the mask because this one was way bigger than a normal human face should be. Make sure you compare it to your own to get the size right. I also cut out the eyes to the shape I wanted them to have. Then using scraps from the mask itself, I glued them into the eye sockets. It's okay to have those gaps on the sides, we'll fill them in later. Next starts the lengthy process of gluing down veins. I'm just taking different colored bits of yarn and gluing it down to the mask. But to make them look more realistic, you'll want to pull them apart so they have different sizes. You'll also want to taper down the edges by pulling on them. You can also taper them down with scissors by pulling on the edges with the scissors instead of cutting the edges. Once I'm done with the yarn, I'll also be adding shredded cotton to add more texture to it. So what is this I'm making, you may be asking yourself. If you don't know Tomie, it's a really creepy, gory, and messed up horror manga from the 1980s. Tomie is the name of an absurdly beautiful girl that makes men fall in love with her only to have them murder her over and over again. Pretty messed up, right? Well, I've partnered up with Viz Media to bring you this look that's based on one of the chapters, where a painter becomes obsessed with Tomie and tries to paint her, but she rejects his painting saying it doesn't live up to her standards. He doesn't give up and tries to paint her over and over again until he creates this double-faced thing. He's driven into insanity, murders Tomie, and then waits for her to regenerate so that she can murder him. I mean, I don't even know at this point. So yeah, I think I might just stick to talking about the makeup from now on. I'm coating everything in latex to simulate skin over the veins. This will also allow me to apply a better paint job. I spread it with my fingers on the bigger areas, but then went in with a paintbrush in the small little crevices. After this much latex, I recommend blasting it with a hairdryer so that it dries a lot faster. Then I'm just continuing the process of creating gross shapes using cotton and latex. I'm applying it especially around the edges so they aren't clean cut. So here I'm painting the mask with different alcohol activated colors. I'm using a mixture of mainly purples and pinks. You always want to go in with the dark colors first and get them into the little tiny crevices to bring out the textures. The reason I'm using alcohol activated colors is because, as you can see, they behave a lot like watercolors and give a really translucent effect. This way you can create layers of color, making the paint job a lot more realistic. And for creepy stuff like this, I think realistic is the way to go if you want it to look really gross. I'm adding blue around the eye area to darken it up, and black as well. I'm also painting some of the veins with a blue to darken them up and to make them a bit less red. I'm using pure red as a base for the head wound, but I'll be darkening it up later. Then I'm going in with pure white to highlight some of the bumps and textures. The white is also pretty opaque instead of being translucent, so it creates a layer on top of the veins that makes it look a bit more like skin. I also want to make the skin look really gross, so I'm going in with purples and blacks all around the face. Now I need something really opaque, so I'm going in with a black grease paint. I'm mapping out the mouth, I'm darkening around the eyes, and I'm also filling in the nostrils. Now with a black liquid liner, I'm just outlining the mouth, really defining the shape. A liquid liner is perfect for making this outline super precise. I went ahead and I filled the eyes with some latex and let it dry. See how the latex gave the eyes a sort of yellow tone? This is perfect because you never want pure white for realistic looking eyes. I'm just using a tiny paintbrush and a reddish pink tone to draw in little veins around the eyes. I also painted what would be the waterline. I used a really thin drawing marker so I could get the pupils really tiny. I'm coating the yarn that's coming out of the mouth with Mod Podge just to make it stiff and give it structure. Once that's fully dry, I'm going to coat it with some silicone. I use this one in particular because it has a slight beige tone to it, so it will create a layer on top of the yarn and kind of hide the fact that it's yarn. Looking at the reference image, you can't really tell if this is a tongue or blood or God knows what, so I just made it as gross looking as possible. I didn't powder down the silicone after it cured so that it would remain shiny. Now to give the forehead wound the look of wet blood, I went in with a dark red nail polish. I used polish instead of fake blood so that it can actually dry and not transfer onto things. I also used it in the corners of the eyes. Then I filled in the lips with a liquid to matte lipstick that I'll be applying to my own lips later on. I used a dark brown gel liner just to map out where the eyebrows would go. Then I properly defined their shape with a black liquid liner. It's tricky drawing straight lines over a textured surface, so take your time with this. Now the mask is done and all you have to do is attach it to your face. But instead of applying it like a prosthetic, I decided to attach it to a headband. I wore the headband in front of my ear on the side that the mask would go. Then I attached the two with some hot glue. Now, I can't stress this enough, do not do this to yourself. Do not apply hot glue while it's still on your head. Do what I say, not what I do, okay guys? Make sure you've got some really strong contact points with the glue, but then to really make it secure, just add some duct tape. Oh god, this is gross. Now, to start the makeup portion. I'm going to block out my eyebrows using some prosthetic adhesive. Once it dries, make sure you powder it down, pressing really hard to flatten them out. Take off the excess powder and repeat the process. I'm just doing this to protect my eyebrows from latex, since latex will rip your eyebrows out if it comes into contact with it. I peeled myself down with a heavy coverage foundation and got on my mask and my wig cap. Then I'm basically doing to my face exactly what I did to the mask, but instead of using Mod Podge, I'll be using latex. To blend my face and the mask together, I'm applying some pieces of yarn with one end on my face and the other end on the mask. But essentially, I'm just repeating the same veining technique all over my right eye. Latex can take a while to dry, so feel free to blast it with a hairdryer. I also cut off some excess yarn that I didn't want anymore. And as with the mask, I'm going in with some cotton and latex to create some weird bumpy textures. Now I'm putting the textures on pause for a bit so I can do my eyes. I'm priming my eyelids with a waterproof primer and painting a base with a white gel liner. Remember what I said about pure white eyes? We don't want them, so I'm setting this with a pale yellow shadow. Then I'm defining the shape with a red pencil, and going in with the alcohol activated color to draw in the little veins. Be really careful when using alcohol colors around your eyes. Keep them closed at all times until the alcohol has evaporated. And just repeat the process on the other side. Like on the mask, I'm taking some black liquid liner to draw myself some fancy new eyebrows. And now that the eyes are fully painted, I'm going back with the textures around the new eyes. I'm also applying it to my forehead, kind of fading it out. At this point, I'm not using the yarn anymore because I wanted to concentrate the veins close to the mask. I'm just creating weird, gross textures with the cotton. Then I covered it all in latex to create a layer of fake skin. Now that that's done, the paint process is going to be the same as with the mask. I'm starting with some purple around the eyes. Now keep in mind this purple is more of a bruised tone, so it is a very reddish purple. Then I'm taking pure blue to darken up some veins. I'm also darkening around the eyes and wherever I want to bring out the gnarly texture. The textures are less intense on the other side of the face, so I'm keeping the paint job interesting by creating texture with a paint job instead of actual physical texture. You can do this by applying the colors with a dotting motion. And that's how I apply alcohol colors in general, just to give them a more random and organic feel. Next, for highlighting, instead of using the pure white, I'm going in with a foundation I used on my face. I'm applying this just on the highest points of the texture. I'm also applying it to the edges of the texture to help blend it into my skin. Then I'm taking pure black to darken some areas even further. To join our foreheads together, I didn't apply veins, I just did a dark paint job with some purple. Here I'm using some very diluted purple to fade the textures out into my skin. I wasn't as pale as the mask, so I went in with some white grease paint. I also wasn't as yellow as the mask, so I went in with a really pale yellow toned concealer. And powdered myself down for good measure. Using a dark brown gel liner, I lined my waterline and contoured the eyes. I also darkened some areas around them. Now I'll be using a mixture of the palest skin color and the pure white, and I'm creating this weird texture under the left eye. Now on the reference image, you can't tell if they're tears or if it's a scar, or I don't know what's going on there. So I just did some weird textures and kind of hoped for the best. I also contoured it with that bruised purple and created some texture on the skin around it. Now for some more gory fun, I'm taking my silicone and creating a gash on my neck. To do this, you'll want to lay down the silicone, leaving the center of the gash thicker and blending out the edges. Then on the thicker area, take your spatula and just create a cut right through it. As you can see, my silicone had already started to cure, so I wasn't able to create a clean gash. It started to lift up in places, so I just went in with some more silicone and closed the gash a little bit and made it a little bit cleaner. Then I filled it in with a pure red base and then mixed black and brown to darken it around the edges. I totally forgot to powder my silicone before I colored it, so there you go. Just by powdering it, it already blends a million times better into the skin, but I also wanted to make it a little bit more inflamed looking, so I went in with some pink and dotted it around the gash to make it look a little bit irritated. Be careful not to go heavy-handed with this, you just want a really light wash of pink. Then taking some dark blood gel, I'm filling in the wound. To make the blood drops, I used a lighter liquid blood, but I didn't really like the color of it. It was too translucent, so I ended up mixing it with the blood gel as well, just to darken it up and make it look more realistic. Now to make our lippies match, I'm going in with that same dark purple liquid to matte lipstick, and I'm creating a very specific shape to my lips. I'm following the reference image and creating a very V-shaped cupid's bow, and I'm also extending the outer corners of my top lips. Then taking the alcohol activated black, I'm drawing in little tiny pupils on my new eyes. Then I put on a wig with another wig attached to the side of my head, and onto some corn syrup drool. I also put some gloss over the drool and on my bottom lip. And that's it. Now you're free to go scare the bejesus out of everyone. Seriously, look at this thing. This is not normal. And if you've never read Tomie, go to viz.com to check out their deluxe edition of the manga that they just put out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!